We are so honored to host David S. Pederson on day 4,514 of us being in business for the second time virtually and more times than that, including our in-person events. His new book is Death Foretold, another Heath Barrington mystery series set in post-World War II Milwaukee. He is a Lambda Literary Award nominated novelist, and he has won great acclaim, including this from Pride Source, Between the Lines, which compares his books to Agatha Christie if Miss Marple were a gay police detective in post-World War II Milwaukee. He is now the author of 7 Heath Barrington novels, including the Lambda finalist Death Checks In and Death Takes a Bow. His novel Death Goes Overboard was selected by the GLBT Roundtable of the American Library Association for the 2018 Over the Rainbow book list. If you've been to David's events before, you know that we've got a little bit of everything coming up, including a reading, a song, a conversation with Alan Carbell, and what a treat you have in store for you. Thank you both for coming. Welcome to Boswell's virtual event series from really far away.
Thank you, Daniel, and good evening and welcome everyone. Great to see all the names in the attendee list. It so warms my heart that you were able to get out, especially you folks in Milwaukee with all the storms and all that good stuff. I'd definitely like to give a huge thanks to Daniel Golden and his amazing and helpful, knowledgeable staff, and Rachel for being here tonight, Rachel Copeland. And also to Carl at Outwards Books in Milwaukee and for his ongoing help and support. And of course, huge thanks to everyone at Bold Strokes Books. I wouldn't be here without all of you, so I really appreciate that. So welcome. I am back here virtually once more with my 7th book, Death Foretold. And I couldn't be happier unless we were all together in person, but you know, it is what it is. So please give me your feedback, by the way, on tonight, my books, or whatever. I love hearing from you. I love hearing from everyone. You can contact me via my website, which is right there. Let me duck out of the way, www.davidspederson.com. Also on the website, you'll find floor plans I've created to various places and locations in my books, some renderings I've done from locations in my books, lots of fun stuff, some photos from past events. There won't be any photos tonight. Puzzles, there's a section on readers' pets, so check that out. And if you would like your pet photo featured on my website, just send me the picture and I will get it posted. So I'm going to be interviewed tonight by somebody very special to my heart, my husband, Alan Carbell, and he also helps me out as my publicist. Hello, Alan.
Hello to everyone watching. For anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Alan Carbell, not Alan Keyes. I'm also Dave's biggest cheerleader. I've known David for probably almost 27 years now, and I've gotten to watch and sometimes help him as he developed his career as an author during the last decade or so. Let me start by saying that everyone who knows Dave realizes what a creative person he is. He's often doing things like planning murder mystery themed dinners, afternoon teas on the Titanic, and his always elaborate family Christmas dinners. But I have to admit that I was kind of surprised and a little bit doubtful when he started writing murder mysteries. Not really because I doubted his creativity, but because as working as a librarian and dealing with the publishing industry, I know how incredibly difficult it is for beginning authors to get literary agents and publishers to even look at your work, let alone agree to publish it. And sure enough, there were a few frustrating years of rejections before a publisher sent him a contract for Death Comes Darkly, and Detective Heath Barrington finally made his literary debut. Both David and Heath have made the last several years a whirlwind of book events, literary festivals, and promotion work. I'll have to admit, it's kind of fun being the first person who gets to read each new book, sometimes several times before they ever get sent in to the publisher. And here we are with the 7th Heath Barrington story. I've enjoyed all the previous cases you've had Heath solve. You always include interesting plot twists and puzzling clues in your mysteries. Can you give us a little synopsis of Death Foretold and maybe do a reading from the book?
Absolutely, I would be delighted. In Death Foretold, which is set in 1947, Heath works to solve the murder of a famous spiritualist who is touring Milwaukee. The spiritualist was found shot in a downtown alley with his pants down around his ankles. And Heath, aided by the police department's newest detective, Grant Riker, must track down the murderer. Heath also wants to take his relationship with Alan Keyes to a new level and asks him to move in with him. But Alan doesn't immediately respond to that favorably. So the passage I'm going to read takes place at the Pfister Hotel in downtown Milwaukee in 1947. And Heath is meeting his Aunt Verbena for tea to discuss his relationship with Alan and also Heath's investigation into the murder of Almanzo Firestone, the all-seeing Almanzo. So let's drop into what I envision the Pfister Hotel dining room of 1947 looked like, using a rendering I created and eavesdrop on their conversation, shall we? I unbuttoned my suit coat with a happy sigh. It's good to be here with you, Auntie, truly. A welcome respite from the cares of the world. Well, thank you, dear. I feel the same way. I look forward to our monthly afternoon tea dates, and Gilbert always takes such good care of us, though that's probably partly due to the fact you over-tip. Good service is worth it. He's quite capable. And he has a nice behind, I added silently to myself. Verbena looked at me as if she could read my thoughts. Quite capable indeed, and then some. Well, shall we have the usual? She said, scanning the petite menu. Why mess with perfection? I gestured for Gilbert and gave him the order. 2 Earl Greys, warm scones with raspberry jam, a side of heavy cream. Gilbert took it down on his pad with a little silver pencil, retrieved our menus, turned, and headed off toward the kitchen. I watched him go, a slight smile on my lips. So, what's new with you and Mr. Keyes? Verbena said, pulling off her white gloves and setting them on top of her pocketbook. Oh, well, we're getting along really well, I think. He's been spending quite a bit of time over at my place. Verbena raised a painted eyebrow, ever so slightly. I hope you're being careful, Heath, regarding your reputation, I mean. You can't afford nasty rumors, especially after that incident with Larry Crow trying to blackmail you. We're both being cautious, don't worry. Actually, I recently asked Alan to move into a 2-bedroom with me. That way it would appear we're just roommates, saving money. Oh my, that seems rather sudden, doesn't it? Well, we've known each other 7 months already. Besides, it seems to me you married one of your husbands in less time than that. Point taken. So what did Mr. Keyes say? He said he had to think about it. Sounds like a wise man indeed. Why rush into things? Look how that marriage of mine turned out after all. Well, I know, but you feel like you've known him your whole life. He makes you happier than anyone else has, and you want to be with him now and forever to grow old together. Well, yeah, something like that, actually. He's my best friend. I trust him with my life, my heart, with my everything, because I know he'll always be there for me, and me for him. Did you tell him any of that when you asked him to move in? What? No. What did you say exactly? I don't know. I said something about how it would make sense financially, and that he's over to my place all the time anyway. And with a 2-bedroom, it would seem like we're just roomies, like I said, so we wouldn't have to sneak around. Oh, just, have I taught you nothing about romance all these years? You teach me about romance? You are a self-confirmed realist, a pragmatist, and all business. You have often told me, Auntie, that marriage is nothing more than a partnership, a sizing up of what each can bring to the table. I don't recall you ever talking about romance. Then I failed you. It's quite true that romance, my dear nephew, is but a temporary feeling of excitement and mystery that will soon fade. Now that sounds like something you would say. Because it's true, but not everyone sees it that way, including your Mr. Keyes. He's a romantic, and if you want to succeed with those types, you have to approach them on their level. You won't sway him by quoting statistics and reasons. Take him out to dinner. Tell him how you really feel about him, and then ask him again. But what if he says no? Or that he still has to think about it? I'll make a fool of myself. If he says no, take it as a temporary rejection. From what I've seen and from what you've told me, Mr. Keyes is just as smitten with you as you are with him. But prepare yourself either way. Personally, I think you've already made a fool of yourself by asking him the way you did the first time. Gee, thanks. You know it's true. These things take proper planning and strategy. Happily ever after has to be created and bartered for. It doesn't just happen. If you don't make things right, you'll prove yourself a fool. You and Mr. Keyes have a great deal to offer each other, and you will form a strong partnership. But you have to get him to agree, and to do that, you have to appeal to him on his level. Gilbert arrived with our tea, scones, and jam. After he poured and stepped discreetly away, Verbena said, "By the way, I believe you told me on the telephone you're working on a new case, aren't you? That magician's murder. Spiritualist. Magician, spiritualist, it's all hocus pocus." Don't say that in front of Alan. He's somewhat of a believer. Well, everyone has their faults. What was that man's name again? Fire something. Firewood? Fireplace? Firestone. Oh, yes. It was in the morning and evening papers and on the radio. Grisly, simply grisly. I suppose you can't share any details. You suppose correctly, Auntie. Police business on a need-to-know basis only. Oh, well, it will all come out eventually when you find Mr. Flintstone's killer. Firestone. What? Yes, Firestone. That's what I said. Actually, you said Flintstone. Don't correct me, Heath. It's rude. And Flintstone is a noble name, the name of the great Saxon gods. Yes, well, the man who was murdered was named Firestone. Of course it was. That's what I said. They say it could be the work of a serial killer, aptly named the Alley Cat Killer. Well, can you at least tell me if you have any leads, if the investigation's going well? I do, and it's not. I must confess I'm puzzled and confused by everything and everyone, including Alan. Oh, you'll figure it out, dear. You always do. Oh my, look at the time. It's nearly 1, and you said you have to leave by 1:15. Don't worry about me. I'll have the hotel call me a taxi. I can drive you home. It's not a problem. Don't be silly. I'll be fine. I got here today myself, didn't I? Hurry up now and finish. But don't gobble or gulp, and stir your tea back and forth. Not round and round, dear. Simply hold your spoon vertically and move it back and forth like a paddle. You never, ever change, Auntie. And for that, I'm forever grateful.
What a great scene. Aunt Verbena is one of my favorite characters. And I think it's significant that you have her giving Heath advice about his relationship with Alan. Were there any specific reasons you included this?
Yeah, definitely. Given the intolerance, that gay people faced during that time period, the 40s and beyond that, and even still do to this day to some degree, I definitely wanted to highlight that there were still people like Aunt Verbena, who is a fan favorite, by the way, that accepted and cared about LGBTQ plus people, even while understanding the need for absolute secrecy and discretion.
You've published 6 Heath Barrington mysteries, now 7, including this one. What inspired the idea for this story?
Well, my 6th book, Death's Prelude, was a prequel. So it took place before all the other books. It was set on the Queen Mary and in England. So this time I wanted to bring Heath back to Milwaukee, his hometown, and I definitely wanted to bring Grant Riker back. You may remember that Grant Riker was a policeman in my 2nd book, Death Goes Overboard. And I got a few letters from fans asking for more of him. So I thought, well, let's promote him to detective and have him help Heath on a case. And he's still kind of figuring out his whole sexuality thing too, which is also explored in the book. So you have to read the book to find out more about that. Interestingly enough, originally this book, Death Foretold, when I first started writing it, it was going to be about the murder of an opera singer instead of a spiritualist. And the title was going to be Death Sings Soprano, which I still like that title. I still may use that later on down the road. I don't know. But I changed it to spiritualist, which I felt opened more possibilities story-wise. There is still a mention, though, of opera in the story because Heath takes Alan to his first opera performance in this book.
Interesting. Okay, Grant Riker, I like that character. He's kind of interesting, and we haven't seen him for a while. I'm glad you're bringing him back. When you sat down to write this book, I'm assuming that you had to do a fair amount of research on 1947 Milwaukee as well as spiritualism. What are some of the more interesting things that you learned when you wrote this book?
Oh boy. This story was actually a fun one to research. I learned not only about spiritualism, obviously, which I had to research in depth, but also about myelomancy, which, believe it or not, is the study of movements of rats and mice and how they can supposedly predict misfortune, as well as stercomancy, which, even stranger, is the study of bird droppings and how people use them to predict the future. Interesting. I also researched the old Black's Hotel, which actually did exist in Milwaukee, torn down in the 60s, unfortunately. The opera singer, Enzio Pinza, the Florentine Opera, with assistance from our friend David Paris in Milwaukee, who I hope is watching tonight. I think he is. My friends Jerry and Gloria were also a big help in my research. And I also discovered some really kind of fun, weird things while I was researching, including the candy bar Chicken Dinner. The name of the candy bar was actually Chicken Dinner, and it was very popular in the 1940s, and it was made in Milwaukee. And despite its odd name, it was basically just chocolate and peanuts. And just yesterday on Facebook, which this is kind of weird, I came across an old ad for the candy bar in one of my groups, talking about a coincidence. It looks like this. So I don't know if you can see that. I'll sneak out of the way, but that was the ad, 5 cents for a Chicken Dinner candy bar. So kind of weird, kind of went with the whole spiritualism thing. So a little strange.
Oh, interesting. Do you start your research before you begin writing, or is it kind of ongoing as you write?
Definitely a little bit of both. I do preliminary research, of course, and then as scenes come up, and if I want to add something for background, like the candy bar I mentioned, I found that because I'm like, I want to have this character doing something. I don't want him necessarily drinking because he's at work. What would he be doing? He'd be eating a candy bar. So I researched candy bars from the 40s, and the chicken dinner one came up. So I'm like, well, I got to use that. Oddly enough, another kind of weird thing, when I was looking for an opera singer, I researched singers of that era, and I came across Enzio Pinza, who I mentioned earlier, and I did decide to use him. He was a famous opera singer. And I put him in The Marriage of Figaro just for purposes of the book. Then a little while later, my friend Jerry sent me some old newspapers from 1947, which is when the books take place. And I was going through them, and I found an ad for Enzio Pinza. He actually did perform in Milwaukee, and he was widely regarded for his portrayal in The Marriage of Figaro, which I had no idea about when I wrote the book. So that was kind of weird.
What a weird coincidence.
Yes, yes, indeed.
What does the title Death Foretold mean exactly?
Titles are always tricky. It's usually the first thing people notice about a book is the title. And I'm sure most folks have probably noticed that all the books in this series start with the word death. So it started with the first book, which was Death Comes Darkly. Then that was followed by Death Goes Overboard, where you first meet Grant Riker. And then Death Checks In, which actually takes place in Chicago at a great old hotel. Then there was Death Takes a Bow, Death Overdue, Death's Prelude, which was the prequel I mentioned before, and now Death Foretold. I always like the title to have something to do with the plot of the book, naturally. And I often try to work the title into the book itself. So usually I have a character say it. In Death Foretold, one of the characters says, oh, his was a death foretold. So that's kind of a fun thing for readers to always look for and watch and see if they can figure it out. So the title Death Foretold seemed fitting to the story of spiritualism, seeing into the future, tarot cards, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, titles are tricky. I think in one of my previous book launches, I was talking about Death's Prelude and the title of that, and how it was originally The Curse of the Swamp People. And somebody at Boswell Books helped me get to the title of Death's Prelude. Not Bulstrokes Books, excuse me, helped me get the title of Death's Prelude, which was definitely a better title. So yeah, titles are tricky and important, but they're fun.
Interesting. Do you have a favorite book in the Detective Heath Barrington series?
Ooh, favorite book. That's like asking a parent if they have a favorite child. I don't have any children, and I don't have a favorite cat. I love all my books for different reasons. How's that for a politically correct answer? But actually, I always enjoy reading and rereading Death Checks In. That was one of my favorites, the one that takes place in Chicago. And Death's Prelude, which was the prequel. I thought that was a really fun book to read and write. And of course, my latest book is always my favorite, no matter what it is.
Well, I agree with you on those two titles. I like them as well. I think my favorite so far has been Death Checks In. That mystery had me stumped until the very end.
Well, good, nice. It's always nice and it's fun to hear which books are people's favorites, and it's always good to try to keep people guessing, and that's one of my goals in writing murder mysteries is to keep people guessing and try to figure it out, but not figure it out too soon. If they arrive at the end and they're like, oh, I should have figured that out, then I've done my job and I'm happy. So.
Well, and that's exactly how I felt at the end of Death Checks In.
Right.
Some authors like to hide secrets or so-called Easter eggs in their stories. I think Stephen King is pretty well known for casually mentioning people in his stories that then become major characters in his future books. Do you ever hide any secrets in your books?
Secrets. I have many secrets.
All right.
I don't usually hide them in my books. What I will do though sometimes is I will often put in plays on words that I find humorous, probably nobody else does, but I find them funny. Or old time sayings that seem funny now, at least to me. Like in one of my books, I honestly don't remember which one at the moment, but one of the characters says, "You always give me solid dick," which in the 40s meant good advice or straight talk. But now it could be taken quite differently. And in Death Overdue, I mentioned in passing that when Heath gets his mail, he comes home and he gets his mail out of his mailbox, along with the phone bill, there's a letter from Heatherwick, which of course is the estate of Simon Quimby from the following book, Death's Prelude. So that was a bit of a foreshadowing Easter egg, which I tossed in there.
Interesting. I did not remember that bit from Death Overdue when I finally read Death's Prelude. Let's talk a little bit about how you approach writing in general. I know that when I write, it tends to be pretty slow and laborious. Do you ever find it difficult to write, or is there a particular kind of writing that you find more challenging?
Oof. To be honest, just writing mysteries can be difficult, like I alluded to before, because I do want to keep the reader guessing, but I also don't want the mystery to be impossible. I know some books I've read, I get to the end of the mystery and it's like, oh, the gardener who was mentioned on page 2 in 3 lines actually turned out to be the killer, and the clues are so obtuse you could never figure it out. I try not to do that. So one of the hardest things in writing a murder mystery is to keep it entertaining and also to keep people guessing, but put the clues in there, but not too obvious that they get to the book and like, well, duh, of course so-and-so did it. But I also don't want them to get to the end of the book and like, that's ridiculous. So that's one of the hardest things for me about writing murder mysteries. But as far as the actual writing process goes, I guess I feel I'm pretty good at writing dialogue, but I do struggle with narrative. For example, there is a scene in Death Foretold where Heath and Riker, Grant Riker, go to the Blatz Hotel. I don't know if you can see it, the Blatz Hotel is like right back there. But anyway, that scene is only about 2 paragraphs long, but it's a narrative of the 2 of them parking Heath's car, walking down the sidewalk, entering the lobby of the hotel, and looking around. Sounds pretty easy and straightforward, but I must have written and rewritten that particular scene about 12 times, and it still needed editing.
Well, I do agree that you do a good job on your dialogue. Yeah, it's always sharp and fun to read. There were a couple of scenes in Death's Prelude that I thought were fantastic. The one that it just carried me away was the dialogue you had between Verbena and her so-called friend Myrtle in their stateroom on the Queen Mary. It reminded me of something from the 1939 movie The Women. And I also found that I was tearing up when reading the climactic scene between Heath and Simon. What is the first book you read that ever made you cry?
Oh, first book that made me cry. I don't know if my mom remembers this or not, and my mom is watching. Hi, Mom. She is awesome. But Charlotte's Web, when I was a kid, no question. I remember sobbing uncontrollably when I finished that book. My mom couldn't figure out what was the matter with me. She tried to console me to no avail. in that book, Charlotte's Web, I think that's part of why I eventually became a vegetarian later in life and developed a love and respect for all living things. It really tore me up.
Well, you are a big animal lover. Speaking of animals, and also the theme you have in this book of spiritualism, what would you choose as your spirit animal?
Ooh, my spirit animal. Is Liz watching? Liz and Mike, hello. Liz is one of my other sisters. I have two sisters by birth, Debbie and Julie, who are awesome and also watching. But I have a lot more sisters than that by connection, including Liz and including Jeannie and a bunch of others. I'm very lucky and blessed to have such wonderful connections with so many people. As far as the spirit animal goes, that's a hard one. I think personally I identify with crows for some reason. But another source told me that my spirit animal is actually a butterfly, and so is Liz's. And so that's part of our connection. I also sometimes feel like a big old hound dog. So maybe my spirit animal mascot avatar would be a hound dog with a butterfly on his nose and a crow on top of his back.
Well, that's an interesting image.
Yeah, yep. Apparently, I have been told that people who have butterflies as their spirit animal love the beauty of nature and are guided by the greatest good when it comes to maintaining balance with the environment. And I must say, being an environmentalist, I guess that seems to fit me pretty well.
Okay, but what about the crow and the hound dog?
Well, crows just fascinate me. I don't know why. I have crows in our guest room upstairs. I just think they're fascinating. I think there's actually crows on the back of the chair you're sitting in. So they're kind of everywhere in our house. They just fascinate me. And I see myself as a big old hound dog because I love to lay around and nap in the sun and get a good scratching.
Okay. Well, I know all writers hope that their books engage and entertain their readers, especially ones who take the time to review the book. It must be pretty gratifying to hear compliments as well as frustrating to hear criticisms. How do you generally deal with both good and bad reviews?
Oh, yes, reviews. I must confess, I do try to read reviews. I try to read all of them, actually, usually from a distance with one eye closed. I'm always a bit afraid to read my reviews, but fortunately, very fortunately, most of them have been extremely positive. If they aren't, I do try to learn from them. I will ask myself, what is it that this particular reader didn't like? Could I make changes based on what he didn't like or she didn't like in future books? Obviously, I love writing, but it doesn't pay the bills. I do get paid a small amount on every book sold in royalties. So readers, feel free to share your copy if so desired, but please encourage your friends to buy their own copy or buy it for them as a gift. My books make great gifts. They fit in stockings nicely and boxes and packages of all kinds. And please post a review of the books on Amazon or Goodreads. It only takes a moment, and it can even be just one sentence, i.e., I enjoyed it. Reviews really are a big deal, and they really do make a big difference.
Do you hear directly from your readers much?
I do get emails. My contact info is on my website. Get out of the way there again. I love hearing from my readers, and usually they're very positive. I've gotten them from all over the world, actually. England, Australia, the Netherlands, of course, all over the US. In fact, one Australia reader is watching tonight from Australia, at least supposedly, where it's just after 10 in the morning on Thursday. So it's already tomorrow, 10 a.m. in the morning, or 10:30, I guess, by this time.
Interesting. That's exciting. I'm sure many people are curious as to whether there will be an 8th book in the Heath Barrington series.
Oh, yes. I am not working on one at present, but I am bouncing around a few ideas, and I am happy to announce that I will have an 8th book coming out. That's 8. 8. Speaking of readers from around the world, another one of my Australian readers found the new book on Amazon before I'd even announced it to the general public. In fact, I haven't even officially announced it. So everybody watching tonight is kind of hearing it first, sort of. This time I'm writing about a totally different character. He's a private detective. Not a police detective, he's a private detective, and he lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and he is older than Heath, in his 50s, even though he, looks much younger. Gee, I wonder where I got that idea from. Anyway, I am not saying that this is the end of Alan and Heath's story, but for now I'm just taking a little break, and I'm going to explore this brand new character, Mason T. Adler, PI. So watch for Murder on Monte Vista coming next year.
Fun. Yeah, we all know that you like to do a song parody tied to each of your books. Do you have one for Death Foretold?
Oh, goodness, isn't that time of the evening already? I do. I always love to do my songs. Since this book is about spiritualism, oh, and by the way, we will be doing questions at the end. So if you have questions, definitely type them into the Q&A there, and we'll do our best to get them answered. So what are we talking about? Oh, the song. I wrote a parody, and as I always do. And since this book is about spiritualism, partly, and the murder of a spiritualist, I thought the parody I wrote would be appropriate. I'm sure everyone will recognize the original song that it's based off of. So without further ado, I will get set up. Drum roll, please. Crystal ball. So let's pop into the Blatz Hotel, the suite of the all-seeing Almanzo at the Blatz Hotel. At least this is my rendering of said suite. And see what's going on, because the seance is about to begin. Blatz Hotel suite. And I don't know if you can see it. I'll try to move out of the way. But you've got the table set up there with the crystal ball and the arrow and the 3 colored candles, which will make sense when you read the book. Oh, and you can't really see it. Anyway. Low water or gin. I can see clearly now in my crystal ball. I can see future times and days of old. I can see warning signs of death foretold. It's gonna be a dark, dark, spooky night. Oh yes, I can tell you now with my tarot cards. Though I don't want to give you a fright, but here's a warning you shouldn't disregard. It's gonna be a dark, dark, spooky night. Oh, look all around, there's nothing but dark skies. Oh, look straight ahead, there's nothing but dark skies. Oh, I can see clearly now in my crystal ball. I can see future times and days of old. I can see warning signs of death foretold. It's gonna be a dark, dark, spooky night. It's gonna be a dark, dark, moonless night.
Good job, good job. I kind of like the kind of the ghostly effect that you had when you moved your hands, like that, virtual background. Very, very well done.
Thank you. You know, I always enjoy doing my songs. They're fun to do. I miss my accompanist, Justin Peters. When we do live events at Boswell Books, he always used to play his guitar for me, and that was always helpful, even though he was a rigorous taskmaster when it came to rehearsing. So this time I was all on my own and singing a cappella, which was a little different, but you know, hopefully it went well. We'll see. So I guess you were kind of like, woof, right there. I would love to answer some questions if anybody's got any.
Dale had two that he asked a little earlier. The first one was, how did you create your cast of people in your books?
That's a very good question. I always start with the Heath Barrington series anyway. I always start with my core group, my two big core, which is Heath Barrington and Alan Keyes. They are, you know, numero uno in the series. And then from there, it depends on the story. So for example, in Death Foretold, which was, I mentioned earlier, originally going to be Death Sings Soprano, I started researching opera singers. Of course, I was going to use a fictitious opera singer originally because he was going to be murdered. That didn't happen. So I switched to spiritualist, and then I created a fake spiritualist to get murdered. And then his entourage had to build from there. So his wife, his agent, his protege, and other suspects, his biggest fan, that type of thing, because you have to, in a murder mystery anyway, you have to have, I try to have at least 4 good suspects, sometimes 5. I try not to go more than 5 suspects because it just gets too confusing. But I try not to have less than 4 because otherwise it's like eeny, meeny, miny, moe, who did it? So that's kind of how I build my cast of characters. And then there are, as I mentioned, there's always going to be fan favorites. So Aunt Verbena has been a huge breakaway. She just seems to capture people's imaginations, and they like her a lot. So she has actually been in every Heath Barrington novel, although in the very first one, Death Comes Darkly, she was only mentioned. She didn't have any scenes or lines. So that's kind of how it builds. And as I mentioned too, in Death Foretold, I brought Grant Riker back from the second book because of fan requests.
Cool. Dale also asked if any of your books have cliffhangers in them.
Cliffhangers, not cliffhangers per se. I think each book is a standalone book. Each mystery is a standalone mystery. I often get asked, you know, which book should people start with when they're reading? And it doesn't matter a whole lot because they are standalone books. There is some carryover from book to book, however. So it does make sense if you start at the beginning, or if you start with the 6th book, Death's Prelude, and that will give you the backstory, and then start with book 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then 7. So yeah, not cliffhangers per se, but there is always little carryovers, and I do reference previous books.
Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat at the moment, but if anyone has them, we can certainly answer them. Don't be shy.
How about you, Alan? Do you have any questions?
No, not really. I kind of asked most of them. Zach asked, when does the soundtrack come out?
Oh, I don't think that would be a big seller. But maybe, you never know.
Bill asked if you announced it. I'm sorry I missed it, but when will the book be available for purchase?
It is available right now, and Daniel and Rachel will have a link to purchase it.
It's up there.
You just posted it, I see that.
Yeah.
So yes, it is available right now. So get your orders in right away.
Dwayne asked when the next in-person book event will be.
I wish I knew. Let me consult my crystal ball. Cloudy. I wish I knew. I wish this was an in-person event. Unfortunately, it's not, but fortunately, you know, we are all here together via Zoom. So.
Randy asked, do you ever change direction of a book while you're writing it? In other words, you change the victim or whodunit, or do you always stick with your original outline?
Oh, that's a very good question. I definitely have been known to change it up as I go. Well, for example, starting with Death Foretold, I started it with the murder of an opera singer, and it became a spiritualist. And in Death Checks In, one of the characters, I don't want to give away in case anybody hasn't read it yet, but one of the characters, when my first draft of the book was a man, and a married man, and that person became a woman as the book progressed. So I definitely will change gears and things depending on how it's flowing and how it goes. One thing people have asked me in the past is how do I write a murder mystery? And I usually will always start at the end of the book because I have to know who's going to get murdered, how they're going to get murdered, and who murders them. And then I kind of start with my dialogue because, as I said, I like writing dialogue, and I will kind of plug in the gaps as we go along. So that's kind of how it progresses.
Bill asked if you do a really good job at writing murder mysteries, but have you ever considered writing a different kind of novel?
I have, actually. One of the first books I ever wrote, actually, before my first Heath Barrington book even was out, was kind of a soap opera ebook about a wealthy family in Boston. And it was kind of inspired by the movie Dynasty, or the TV show Dynasty, if anybody remembers that. So it was very kind of soap opera-y, and these two brothers, and the patriarch had just passed away, and they were fighting and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it was not a good book. I never even submitted it for publication, but I have thought about, maybe I should go back and revisit that, or start a whole different book. I enjoy murder mysteries. Agatha Christie has always been my hero, but it would be fun to attempt a different type of book, and I very well may do that.
Are any of your books in bookstores?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Boswell Books in Milwaukee on Downer Avenue definitely carries all my books. Outwards Books in Milwaukee definitely carries all my books. Any local bookstore that you come across can order them if they don't carry them. I just found out there's a bookstore in Palm Springs that carries them. When Alan and I were on vacation in Chicago, we popped into a local independent bookstore. What was the name of that?
Books.
What?
Unabridged Books.
Unabridged Books in Chicago, and found out that they were carrying my books. So I think they are out there at bookstores, and if they're not currently carrying them, ask them to carry them or order them for you. But obviously Boswell Books in Milwaukee is always our #1 bookstore to go to.
That kind of leads into, I'm going to skip a question and then come back to it. Are there any signed editions available?
Not at this time, just because of everything COVID related and virtually, I haven't had the opportunity to sign any books. If somebody wants to mail me a copy, I would be happy to sign it and send it back to them, though, or if they want to come for a visit or or if I'm in their neck of the woods, I'm always happy to sign books. I definitely love doing that.
And now this one's a fun question. Matt asked, if you were approached by a movie studio to make one or more of your books into a movie, would you do it?
Yes. Yes. I think that would be a lot of fun. I would love to see, I would love to see my characters on the big screen or the little screen, any screen, and just see them kind of come to life and leap off the page. Obviously, I have heard some horror stories from authors whose books were made into films or movies or TV shows where they kind of butchered the whole story or changed the character or whatever. That would definitely be upsetting because I feel very close to Heath and Alan and Verbena. And, if they suddenly made Heath a straight detective or something like that, that would just be weird. But yeah, I would definitely be open to seeing them progress into a TV show or a film or a movie. I think that'd be fun.
It would be fun, wouldn't it? Who would you have, or who would you choose to have play Heath?
Ooh, I get asked that a lot, and it changes all the time. For Alan, I always thought the guy from Call Me by Your Name would be really good, whose name escapes me right now. You know what it is?
Timothée Chalamet.
Timothée Chalamet, yes. I always thought he would make a great Alan. For Heath, I don't know. He's very charismatic. He's in his early to mid 30s. I think I adore Ryan Reynolds and Ryan Gosling, so either one of those would be wonderful.
Kevin asked, who is your favorite character besides Heath and Alan?
In the books, I kind of got to go ahead with the fan favorite since Aunt Verbena. She's so much fun to write. You had mentioned, Alan, earlier about the scene in Death's Prelude with her and Myrtle Overmeyer, and I gotta say that was a fun scene to write. I was cracking myself up. I always enjoy writing her. She's one of these people that has a good heart, but she doesn't always know what she's saying or doing. She's sometimes can be a little befuddled, but she is a spitfire and she's a character. So I definitely love her. Beyond that, I don't think there's a character I don't like besides the killers always.
How do you deal with, Zach wants to know how you deal with writer's block if you ever have it.
Oh, sure, absolutely. It happens. I am actually, you will be the first to know, working on a 9th book. I'm about halfway done with it. And I've definitely been experiencing writer's block with this. The best thing for me is to just step away for a while, take a little time off, take a vacation. Although that's easier said than done because my mind's still going, and sometimes in the middle of the night I'll still wake up, still write down notes that I can't decipher in the morning. And my mind's always thinking, it always is about these books. I live and breathe them sometime. But yeah, writer's block it's real, and it stalls me sometimes, but I will try to step back. I will try to take a break. And then usually I just start from the beginning of what I've written and go through it. And usually, fingers crossed, it kind of flows from there.
Okay, some of the questions that are coming in, I think kind of were already answered, but I'll just mention them, and I think we did touch on them. Daniel asked if you've ever thought of writing a different genre. I think you already talked about that. Dale wants to know where you get your ideas from.
Well, it's not from real life. I don't go around killing people. Where do I get my ideas from? It is a good question. Death's Prelude, of course, the idea for that came because people always ask, why does Alan drink his martini with a pickle? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? So I kind of wanted to give the backstory. in Death Foretold. I'm like, well, I want him to come back to Milwaukee. He needs to solve another case. What's that case going to be? How about an opera singer who's traveling through Milwaukee and gets murdered? And then, as I mentioned before, that changed. So I get my ideas from my weird, strange mind, I guess.
Let's see here. Peggy wants to know, are any of your characters based on real persons?
Maybe a compilation of people sometimes, but no, not typically. Especially any main characters, they're all from the brain. They're all from the strange, weird mind of Dave Pederson.
Well, I do know you, a character here and there in some of the books, you've like began that character as someone you knew in real life, but then that you added to them.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the fun older woman in
Oh, true.
Death Checks In. So.
Yes, that is true. Yes, that was inspired by a real person. So yeah, that's true. Forgot about that. It was fun to write.
All right, Mary Beth asked about who you'd want to play Heath and Alan. I think we already kind of talked that. Dave and Kathy said they think Tony Shalhoub would be a good choice.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see that.
Beth said that your setting of 1947 is always so detailed and brings you right into that moment in history. She just wondered if you were going to have any of the winter holidays in your story.
I have thought about that. I have done some renderings actually of Heath's apartment during the holidays and things like that. So I think that's fun. And anybody who's read the whole series has probably noticed anyway, that it progresses through the year 1947. So if I write another book, and I very well may, as far as the Heath Barrington goes, it will definitely continue up through the holidays, leading up to New Year's. I think a New Year's mystery might be kind of fun. So we'll see. And even in the new series, I might shift that up forward to the holidays. Who knows?
What month are you in right now with Death Foretold in 1947?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
I know they go chronologically, but I can't recall off the top of my head. When they're in 47. I know it's still summer or early fall, right?
Yes. It hasn't progressed past summer yet. I will tell you in just a moment, thanks to the brilliance of computers. September. Ooh, well, there you go. Chapter 1, September 12th. So further along than I thought in the year.
Okay. Kevin wants to know if there are any vinyl records that would be great to listen to while reading the books.
Yes, absolutely. Ella Fitzgerald, who is one of my all-time favorites, Louis Armstrong, love. Of course, Bing Crosby, the Andrews Sisters, any of that great 1940s music. Dinah Washington, love her. All that good stuff, definitely out there.
Mary Beth wants to know if you've thought of any other locations you'd like to use for Heath and Alan.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've taken them, obviously Milwaukee, a lot of Milwaukee. I took them to Chicago. I took Heath on the Queen Mary to England in Dusk Prelude, which was a lot of fun because I got to combine my love of ocean liners and my love of travel in England with Heath. I think it would be fun to explore, maybe northern Wisconsin, Door County, or who knows, maybe they'll even travel to Arizona and hook up with my new private detective.
Dave and Kathy just mentioned or asked if might Heath travel to LA and run into Philip Marlowe.
Wouldn't that be interesting? Hey, you never know. Could be.
And then Dale said, have you ever done any of your books in Canada?
I have not done Canada yet, but I think we should go up there and research some locations.
In the summer.
In the summer.
Um,
Winter.
Now, I hope I got everyone's question if you put it into the chat roll, but if I didn't, please, send it again. Otherwise, I think we've covered all the questions that I've seen.
Okay, well, cool. Well, if anybody else has any questions that we didn't get to or that you didn't feel comfortable, asking tonight, again, feel free to contact me on my website right there. And I will be happy to answer them for you. Or if you have any comments or feedback about tonight, just shoot me a message. I always happy to hear from people. And I always try to get back to them as fast as I can. So thank you all again so much for being here with me tonight and for sharing this amazing journey with me. It's been quite a ride. My goal always is to entertain, to inspire, to encourage. Do what you love, but along the way, do what you don't hate. Keep moving, don't stop. And remember, it's never too late to have a happy childhood and to live your dash. So if you had fun tonight, please buy a book via Daniel and support your local bookstore. In fact, buy 2 or 3 or 4, and always support your local bookstores and your local authors. And take it away, Daniel.
Thanks to both of you. Congratulations again. And thanks to everyone for coming. We wouldn't have a virtual bookstore without you. Hope to see you in another event.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Everybody, thanks again.